Hello and welcome back to the Beauty Way. Today we have a very, 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 very special guest, and I might be a little bit biased because Nic Delaney, or Coley D, Coley is how I like to call her, is joining us today, all the way from the office in this house whilst I'm in the living room. And Nic is my partner, my dearly beloved. And I'm super excited to have this conversation today. We've been together for almost 3 years, and we have been on an epic wild ride together of beautiful expansion and ascension and evolution together. And one of the epic, beautiful things that I've received from her on our journey together has been a really big expansion into relationships, because this is something that she likes to delve into. And so I've learned and received so much from her in our relationship through her own learnings and education and deep dive, all the way dives into intimacy and connection. And so I've got to delve into some different avenues and areas and really explore different ways of relating since being together. And it's been a really incredible ride, hence why we're still trucking on together. And so welcome, Nic. Welcome to the space. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, my love. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be here. What an amazing gift it is to be in time and space with both of you.
Yeah.
And to see your beautiful faces. Any opportunity is a good opportunity to hang out, so I'll take it.
Yes. Thanks, son. And so you've been on this podcast before, actually, but that was before I was a co-host, and that was just with Kirsty.
Yes, and we've upgraded since then. I now have this amazing microphone because the sound on my previous one was shocking. And so hopefully you're going to be able to hear me crystal clear this time around.
Amazing. And so maybe if the audience has already heard you before, perhaps they know a little bit about what you do. But for those who haven't heard the previous episode, do you want to just give us a little kind of once over synopsis of what you're into?
I am, as you said, we had a little chat in the lead up to this recording and discovered that I am very much addict when it comes to relating and relationships, and anything that is within that realm of relating, I just indulge, devour, froth on, and it continually calls me forth and expands me. I feel like in other alter realities, I could have been a million other things, but for my love of understanding relationships and where I reside within that and discovering who I am, my relationship with myself first and foremost, and then understanding how to relate with others is such a driving force for me. And so currently, as it stands, I run sacred sexuality events. And yeah, I've had a shift in my life and internally, which is calling me for other things. And so everything that I do will be along those lines of understanding how to relate with yourself, with your body, and then how to relate with others in the world. And so that's pretty much what I enjoy and what I want to bring forth. And so I am the forever student, and so I'm constantly learning, and I'm starting to learn that I get to also embrace the teacher within me as well. And so I feel like that's also part of me coming out more and more and more, is to embrace that I have things that I can share with the world, and not keeping it and hoarding it all to myself.
I love it, Nic. And first, I love, what you're saying about addicted to learning about relating, because for me also, like I've said for so long, that life is just about relationships. Like we chose to come here to relate to other humans and for us to be in relationship with other humans. And I think that as the collective consciousness rises, there's so many questions that are coming forth about how we've lived over the last 2000 years, and the ideas and the ideals that have been imprinted upon us of how we should relate. And I don't know, a few months ago, I saw a post from somebody that's quite well known in the coaching realm, and they spoke about the relationship that they had and how they were exploring how to move beyond the constructs of so-called marriage, which is a template that's been placed upon us, right? And it's definitely something that's close to my heart too, because I've also been doing the same thing in my personal relationship and unraveling all of the constructs that have actually, it like, under the guise of creating a relationship of love between two people, have actually created all of these limitations and constraints upon how we should interact with other humans, and have created shame and guilt as the driving forces behind a relationship. And so this, I'm totally here for all of this, and like learning and opening to how can we better relate to one another as humans.
Mm.
100%.
I saw a post yesterday that I got sucked into because it said all it said was, if you have a friend, if you have the phone number of a friend's husband, there's something wrong. And I was like, huh? And I saw the thread and the conversation that was happening, and it was basically saying that if you have friends, you should absolutely not have their husband's part or the partner's mobile numbers, because why would you put yourself in that situation where you could absolutely end up cheating on your partner with your friend's husband? And I was like, holy smokes, like I'm so far out of that these days that even hearing that, I was like, is that how far we are going these days, where we literally cannot even relate with the opposite sex out of fear that those shadowy aspects would be revealed, or that we're so suppressed in our like connection or the ways that we connect through the conditioning that we're like limited. And so this is definitely something that I have been significantly opened up to through Nic's exploration. And so I'm curious, like, let's just start there. I want to hear your perspective on that.
Oh God, there's so many ways that it could go. Obviously not understanding the person and where it stems from within them, or what has had them come to that space where that feels normal and okay, or like, the fear that's driving them, whether it be insecurity, whether or not it be like, how they were brought up, society's conditionings. There's so many ways in which that could have that be the felt feeling or experience of another. And so, I mean, personally, for me, if I was to make an assumption of where that would come from, it was heavily driven by fear, fear of, losing control of the sense of who you are, losing control of your relationship as it is, your partner, what that would make mean about you. I think we're also really driven in society of like having things play out a particular way in relationship represents failure. And so if we stay together and we can't make it work, and then all of a sudden our time comes to an end, then we've failed, like we're failing in relationship. Like there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and if you do it the wrong way, then it's failing. And also just like infidelity as a whole, I feel is a like awesome reflection of where these parameters don't work within a relational container, because we continually are witnessing people spilling over the edge and can't contain themselves in relationship because we don't understand who we are, what's driving us, like why we feel pulled to like be unfaithful, or why or understand ourselves and our partners and what would drive our partners to be unfaithful, and then what that means about us. Like there's so many there's so many layers to it, and I love it because it's juicy and it's rich, and I always want to get to like the source of that and just like understand it. But I feel like that's what I'm continually trying to understand and learn as well, is like not just labeling something as right or wrong like we have up until now, but actually going deeper or being like, and what would happen if your partner was unfaithful? Like, what would that then mean about you? Or what would happen if your partner did have your friend's number? Like, what does that bring up within you? Like, there's a curiosity that I have of like understanding it beyond the just like blanket statement of you should or you shouldn't, and like approaching it with like curiosity. And so yeah, I feel like when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, I need to know more. I want to learn more about where this stems from within you, and why that is an issue. Like, why is that a concern for you?
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that question that you said, is what does that mean about me? Because it's something that throughout my personal journey, I've recognized how, because we've been together for over a quarter of a century, and this way that we've created because of constructs that were templated upon us of relating and taking the other person's actions personally. So there's that piece, and then there's also the communication piece. And so it's an inability to communicate from an open-hearted space with like full truth, integrity, openness, and all of the things. And that's if that's my issue, then it's my issue. And if I'm doing something, then I don't expect the other person to take it personally. But so often we do. We take the other person's actions personally, and we create this whole story in our head about what it means about me. And and like you're saying, there's layers, because we get to see what's happening on the external, but then it's an invitation to go internally and go, okay, well, what am I creating within myself that's offering me the opportunity to see this, that I've created this in the external as well. And so there's so many nuances of relating to one another, which goes so far beyond the templated constructs that have been placed upon us.
And I feel like the reason why it's so it's so nuanced is like, I can remember a time where that was my story. Like, I would always project my shit onto my partner. They were always to blame for why I was feeling a particular way, and simultaneously, like, I needed them. And so it's like that whole, like, they call it love addiction. It's like I'm doing some of Terry Reel's work. He's awesome. He's like, does RLT, which is relational life therapy, and I just soak him up like a sponge. Like, I just absorb everything that he shares. And yeah, when we are like either love addicted or a love avoidant, like, it creates these relational dynamics. And when we're either like, he has 4 quadrants, so you're either one up, one down, on the boundaryless side or the walled off side. And so we're continually moving within that, but in the middle is healthy. And so none of us were modeled well, a lot of people were not modeled about what a healthy relationship is. And so we generally will be in one of these quadrants. And then when we're in one of them, we're either walled off or we're boundaryless and like a love addict. And then it sort of creates these relational dynamics, and we're just in this like forever dance where we're either feeling like we don't want to connect, and we're grandiose, and we're just like projecting everything onto our partner so that we can feel significant, because we don't want to have to feel the shame of like not knowing, or the shame of where this imprint came from in the first place, or we don't want to have to feel the shame of being like addicted to this other person. And so we create these confines of relating, of like, if you want to relate with me, if you want to be with me, this is what it looks like. Or I need you, tell me what I need to do, I'll do whatever you want me to do in order for me to be okay. And so it's continually like, it's relational, but it's not necessarily healthy. And so just like understanding like these bodies of work, and like getting to understand more and more and more about relationships, and like understanding the nuances, I can see like in the past where I've been within one of these quadrants, and really like started to like zoom out and to come into that place. And like it requires 100% self-responsibility and also self-acceptance. And unfortunately, society doesn't support that. It doesn't support that. We're not taught how to do that. And so we stay in that sort of shame-based place because like no one teaches us, hey, this is what it looks like to be 100% self-responsible. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that you became adaptive as a child, and this is what you've learned growing up. And there's another way to do this. And so when you can accept that and you can take full responsibility for that, there's an opportunity for something else. But that's a whole fucking process of relating that we're not taught and we don't understand. And so it's just like, fuck you, this is your fault. And it's just like, I'm too good for you, you don't deserve me, or like, help me, what do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you want me to do in order to stay in relationship with you. And it's just like, you know, like I just see so many ways in which it plays out, but it generally stems from like just not knowing and not understanding how to support yourself within that process to move beyond those confines or the templates that you're referring to before, to open yourself up to relating in a completely different way, which is conscious, and then taking full fucking responsibility. So I don't know if you're allowed to say fuck here, but taking full responsibility for the role that you've played up until that point and forevermore, you know, like that's the thing. You don't just get to a point and you're like, oh, I'm enlightened in relationship, I know all things now. It's just a constant chipping away and unraveling that happens. And you know, it's hard. It's not necessarily an easy path to choose. And so it is much easier to stay within that and then blame the other person or hide in shame and constantly appease the other for a sense of self-worth, you know. So anyway, I just went on a full tangent there.
or just run away or run away.
That was I was thinking the same. Yeah. And it's funny that you said like that we're not, many of us are not modeled a relationship. It had me consider that even if someone had a, you know, good familial kind of parent relationship, like society does not model good relationships. Like when you think about our relationship with power and with the government, you know, there's such a codependency in that. It's like there's a complete lack of sovereignty. And so that is just a baseline for society. You know, we are so conditioned to believe that things are happening to us and that there isn't the power to have responsibility for our own reality. And then we can break it down through so many different like areas of relationship and it filters in. And there was something else I was going to say about that. You know, I was going to share that Nic and I met 3 years ago and neither of us had been in a relationship with a woman before. And through our coming together, we had many conversations about, okay, well, how is this going to work if we're both attracted to men? How are we going to navigate being in a relationship while simultaneously being attracted to the opposite sex? And based on what society would tell us, like monogamy is the main and only option. And anything outside of that, and this is very heavily in the kind of conscious community too. It's like monogamy equals good, and the majority of monogamy equals good perceptions say that anything other than that is not good. I don't know, for like a better way to say it. And so we've had opportunities to explore what can that look like outside of those standard constructs of monogamy. How can we be in open communication, as you said, Nic, where we can be honest and transparent with one another about how we're feeling about different ways that we can connect with other people. And what that's given us an opportunity to do is to break down a lot of those limitations. And for me personally, it has offered me so much to reflect on about how much of my relating was because that's how it's done, as opposed, like, it was just so natural to do it the way that it was done before because that's what's been modeled. And even though it's one of the gnarliest things to be willing to presence and to unpack, because never have I had an opportunity to presence the parts that are not willing to be outside of that box because it's so normal to stay inside the box. And so there's never been an opportunity to have a conversation about what would it look like if we were to relate with someone else, because that was never even part of the, it wasn't even in my conscious awareness that that could be a thing. And so the self-responsibility part is so interesting because we're really not modeled that as a society in any aspect of relating. It's always that there's someone else, and it really, you know, I was thinking just then, it brings back to this thread that we return to so often in this podcast, which is the sovereignty piece. You know, it's like, can we create something that's different? Can we create something that doesn't necessarily fit into a box? Can we go beyond the constructs and be willing to create something that's really different? And yeah, I feel like I've received that opportunity through our willingness so far. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've, like, you've said it and Nic said it as well, like the aspects of good and bad. Like, who gets to tell me what's good in my relationship and what's bad in my relationship? It's only up to how I feel, and, you know, for each of us, how we feel about what's actually currently in this moment happening in my relationship within myself, which then gets projected into the external, and I get to decide which action I'm going to take in relation to that. And, you know, this everyone has an opinion, but the people with the opinions are usually the ones that haven't necessarily gone internally and, like, done the deep dive to find out what's actually really going on for me. Because if I'm truly allowing myself to make my own choices, then I'm not going to project my choice onto someone else and say that your choice is bad, because your choice is right for you in this moment, and you get to decide how that looks for you. And this is such an important piece of relating to one another, like the respect of each person's choice and not discriminating when their choice is different to mine.
Yeah, I remember a time when I had the perception that people that were in either open style or polyamorous style relationships were avoidant. And that it meant that they had an avoidant tendency to intimacy and connection. And so in order to avoid being in a circumstance with that level of intimacy, then many was better. And what I have learned since is that actually, I'm sure that is the case for some people. And the same is true in monogamous relationships. The same is true. Like, it's across the board. It's not just because it's in multiple people. It's just because we're humans. And, you know, what I've learned since then is actually having a willingness to explore what that could look like. And, you know, for Nic and I, it's the potential of being in a 3-person relationship where there's a man in the relationship as well. And for me, in this exploration, and neither of us really know exactly what that's going to look like, whether it's going to work for us, whether it's even 100% what we want, because we haven't had an example of it yet. And so, and what I have recognized through it is, for those that are doing that style where it's outside of a standard monogamous kind of thing, that it is, for those doing it consciously, it is more gnarly and more expansion into potentials of intimacy and vulnerability than anything that I've been exposed to previously. Because for me to be not just faced with the potential, but to actually witness like my partner in intimacy with another person, even just like emotional intimacy, and be available for that is like something that, you know, is so conditioned and modeled to us on TV, on movies, in society, as that equals that you're going to be alone. You know, that equals that they don't love you anymore. That equals that they have done something wrong, or that they, you know, and the standard thing is like, he cheated on me and so therefore I left. You know, it's like there isn't any willingness to have a conversation before it even gets to that about, hey, I'm attracted to this other person. Like, because, you know, what I've learned even through our relationship with Nick is like, sometimes just speaking to it and sharing it is enough to dissolve it, and there may not be any action that needs to happen. But the fact that it stays in the shadows for so many people, and there's no willingness to explore it because it's such a black pan hard no, this is a terrible idea, that's where the infidelity can come from, because it's oozing out the sides because there's no capacity for a conversation about it.
I think this conversation in itself will be activating people that are listening to it. And what I wanted to ask you, Nic, is when you have people that come to you and, you know, you're working with people in different situations, certain situations, where's a starting point for somebody to open to something that they may not previously have been opened to, which is going to help them have a deeper level of ability to relate from a balanced, from a harmonious perspective, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, first of all, like to get to that state where you can remain regulated in relationship is like such a huge process for someone. Like, it just, like, that is not something that happens overnight kind of a thing. That is like a a continual journey of understanding. And yeah, I think sometimes in relationships we can have this idea that secure attachment is like the goal, and that's like where we need to get to, and if we're not there, then, you know, again, we're failing. Whereas I think understanding the full spectrum of what is available, no matter where you reside, whether you're avoidant, whether or not you're fearful avoidant, whether you're whatever your attachment style is, understanding what's trying to emerge from that without trying to get somewhere other than where you are is like, if you hold that as a baseline, that all that is happening is that your nervous system is trying to show you something in relationship, and something is trying to emerge from your body, which is what will ultimately allow you to expand beyond that. Like, that's the place to start, is understanding your nervous system, understanding like your attachment style, understanding like what your like involuntary responses are. Like, you know, are you fight, flight, freeze, fawn, you know, which is people pleasing, trying to appease your partner. Where do you currently go? Like, what wisdom is the felt body experience trying to show you? And then when you can become relational with your body and understanding that, then I feel like speaking from that space is what opens you up to being fully relational with someone else. Because other than that, I feel like it's just reaction and responding to something that wasn't even happening in real time. The now moment experience is amplified, and because of the past experience. And so when we can really like slow down and start to tune to our body, and just like for instance, I'll give you an example. Like when Carissa and I am really challenged in sharing how I'm feeling, because I was constantly dismissed as a child. And so what I want didn't matter. How I felt was irrelevant. And so for me to speak to that takes like, it is like completely against anything that I learned growing up. And so my nervous system becomes so activated in the face of like me being like, it's okay to speak to what you want. It's okay to acknowledge how you're feeling. There's a part of me that's like, alert, 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 abort mission, it's not safe, it's not safe. And so my responsibility is to become relational with that part of me, to become relational to, you know, the adaptive child that has endured whatever it's endured, that is challenged in relationship, so that I can say to Carissa, hey, I'm acknowledging that I feel really overwhelmed in just like speaking to this, but I also like, it feels really important to me. And I also have to be okay, because sometimes it's really clunky and I don't actually say it how I want it to say it. Sometimes I blurt it out because I'm so uncomfortable with like actually speaking to it, but also holding space for that, you know, like being like, it's going to be awkward sometimes, it's going to be clunky, sometimes you're not going to get it right, you're going to be dysregulated, it's going to feel disorientating, it's a new way of being, it's a new way of relating. And so I think starting with your own body and your own nervous system is what's going to make that available, because I can say, hey, I'm noticing that what you've said has really activated a part of me. I might not know where that comes from, I might not know why that is, but I can speak to what I'm noticing within myself and then choose what I need in order to come back into regulation, so I can either continue the conversation or you know, come into co-regulation so that we can continue, you know. So there's, I think, just understanding your nervous system and understanding, you know, these coping mechanisms that we have, which often take us out of relating because they're so deeply uncomfortable, and then just creating space for what's there, and just allowing it to be witnessed and held. Because there's a lot of people who may even go through that process, but their partner's not available for the truth of that. And so again, that's like another challenge of, can you hold yourself in the face of someone who can? And so that's like a whole other layer again. So I think it, like, you have to start with yourself and like become relational with yourself so that you can, irrespective of how someone does or doesn't show up in relationship to you, you know what's happening internally within yourself, and you've got yourself, and then you can open up beyond that. So yeah,
I love that. And you know, everything you just said, draw it back to, it's a journey of understanding yourself and getting to know what's going on in your body. When you were speaking, I was thinking about, actually, I remember like one specific situation, but often I used to, when James and I were in a conversation, I would say to him, I feel like running away from you right now. And simply by saying those words, I was giving my little girl permission to be able to speak and to feel heard, so that I could remind her that it's okay, she's safe, and I could just stop for a moment and lean into the situation instead of running away, which was my pattern, was just running away when it gets hard. And in your words, that's the I think like the avoidant one, attachment of what did you say? Avoidant attachment or something?
yeah, avoidance.
Yeah, avoid it. And so that was my pattern, was being avoidant, and learning to feel that in my body, of like every ounce of me just wanting to get out of here. And instead of following that, knowing that that's actually not what I want to do in this moment, was just stopping and breathing and letting myself speak the words so that I could then come into that. And it's funny, because I was having a conversation with a client this morning, and we had this really fun conversation about her inner child and her lover and her like warrior, if you like. And I was saying to her like how they've created this relationship dynamic where the lover just gets addicted, and she's like, and she gets all like, gives herself away completely because she's imbalanced, and the warrior warrior just like pulls her in and like berates her and gets really angry. And so and then the lover gets all ashamed and she's like, oh my God, I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be needed. And I said to her, what you're actually doing is you're recreating the relationship between these two parts of you and helping them to come back into balance and like feeling in your body, letting your little girl speak and not berating her for wanting what she wants, but actually going, okay, I see that, but let's just wriggle it in for a little bit because this never works out well for you, and allow yourself to do something different and like come into a space of balance in this moment. And that whole thing just like brings balance back to the nervous system and lets a person come into full presence with themselves, whereas before it was just like, no, let's just get out of here.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. It reminded me of like what has been probably the biggest healing tool modality that I have ever learned, which is parts work, and just like understanding the parts and like knowing that each part always has a positive intent, irrespective of how we may perceive it. And so for me, when I could understand that, I was able to approach my internal landscape, if you will, with like an edge of curiosity, as opposed to, oh, I hate that I'm always doing this. I hate that, like, you know, I've got this part that's like always berating me, or I hate that I respond in this particular way, or, you know, and just like always finding fault. And I was like, okay, if there's a positive intent to this reaction or this response or this, like, from this part, then what is that? You know, like, what is it trying to do? How is it trying to serve me? And like you said, that they call it like firefighters or managers. And so when we are feeling like a lot of sensation, that firefighter is going to be like, fucking get out of here, abort mission, go, 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 go. Let's not deal with too much sensation, you know? And then so you're going to run, and then you're going to have this manager part that's trying to like damage control. And so it's just like so much is happening internally. And when I learned like all of this, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, it makes so much sense, because underneath that is the exile, which is the wounded child and the burden that it carries. And so these parts are constantly trying to protect the truth of what's underneath that, which is the pain point that we endured, the wound, if you will, the part that's still unhealed. And that's what I feel a relationship does, is it illuminates these pain points. It sort of rubs up against these like parts where we're burdened and brings it up so we can actually deal with it in real time and move and expand beyond that. If not, we're constantly in reaction or, you know, damage control from how we react and respond, and because of those. And so I love that you shared that she was having those two different parts, because I started thinking about what was playing out. And like that's been so healing for me, like so unbelievably healing. And I'm still continually trying to understand them, you know, all the different parts within. So, and just having that inner relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful, because what ends up happening is we end up in this like never-ending cycle, because the part that, you know, in your example, Kirsty, the lover and then the warrior's then shaming the other part, and then we're shaming the warrior for shaming the part and for feeling the shame, and it just goes,
yeah,
and we don't actually get anywhere, and it's still doing exactly what Nic just said, which is avoiding the piece that is or not even just avoiding, protecting the part that is below that, which is, why are these two parts, what are they trying to protect me from, as opposed to just staying in that cycle. And I feel like in the space of particularly, I guess, you know, conscious relating, I think that there's actually a lot of shame that is put into that space of, if you're feeling a particular way, that means that you are still wounded, or that means that you are still unable to have a healthy relationship. Or if you notice that you go into your avoidant patterns or your anxious patterns, that means that you're not yet secure and that you're not yet da 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 da. And I feel like the place in which you mentioned before, Nic, which is that it's a never-ending journey. Like, you know, I'm sure that Kirsty can attest to this after 25 years of being in a really beautiful, solid relationship and conscious, is that there's always things that, like, why would we be alive if there wasn't more to unpack? Why would we be in relationship if it wasn't for our own consciousness evolution? Like, it's part of the human experience and the consciousness experience of being a human and having these experiences to have us evolve and ascend into greater as in more consciousness, more conscious awareness. And any time that we're in judgment of a part of ourselves, we get to be curious about the part that's judging our other parts too, because I feel like that is the most typical thing that I see with people. They're like, oh, I felt this way and I shouldn't have felt that way because da 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 da. And it's like that conversation just keeps it over here and it's exacerbating the whole thing. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's so interesting. When you were sharing, Nic, all I could think of was this, you know, trend that I've seen, you know, in social media. We listen and we don't judge. And we were joking about it, using it for something the other day. But I feel like it's such an epic trend, because what happens and what I've seen modeled in these reels of people doing it is that they're like owning up to all these different things. And, you know, I remember seeing this one where there's this like man and woman and they're in relationship, obviously. And one of them says, like, they're basically, we listen and we don't judge. And one of them says, sometimes I know that the bin hasn't been emptied, but I leave it there because I'm waiting for you to do it. Or I think it was actually, they said about the dog pooing. And they were like, I seen that the dog's pooing, but I has pooed on the backyard or the somewhere. And they're like, and I choose not to do it because I don't want to do it and you'll have to do it. And then the other person, it's their turn. And they say, I do exactly the same thing. I see that it's there and then I don't want to do it. And so I wait until you do it. But I feel like what it's creating beyond the playful, like, lightness of, you know, these funny reels is that it actually is giving people, I guess, a container to have conversations where they can own things that maybe they're like hiding or not speaking to or whatever. And, you know, we've had so many conversations in our relationship about how we can create even better containers where it's just space for that. And I mean, we have a level of kind of constructed, built safety over time where even when it's a bit more challenging to speak to something, there is an underlying kind of thread of like, even though that part of me thinks this is going to be unsafe, there's another part of me that knows that it is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, but that's because we've had so many intentional conversations, intentional container moments of we're going to have a hard conversation right now. And I remember I've always called them like hard conversations, and Nic's always like, I feel like your description of them has always been really different. You're like, oh, I don't know if it's a hard, but I do find it hard. I like, that's how I would describe it sometimes, is like those vulnerable, exposing conversations of like, I'm exposing a part of myself. I find that's how I would describe it, hard. It doesn't feel fun for me. I mean, it feels fun on the other side. It feels really fun on the other side. I'm like, wow, you know, we've broken through this part. I've broken through this part. We together have like popped into a new like level, advanced, like we've advanced to the next level of our relationship by having this conversation. But in the moment, like there's a lot of resistance, you know, that it's like, I don't find this feeling of the resisting of exposing this part fun. But when we create a container for it, I feel like there's a little bit more conversation. And why I bring that piece of like, we listen and we don't judge is like, when you asked before, Kirsty, when you asked Nic, like what you would suggest, it's like, I feel like having intentional moments of even just playing that game, we listen and we don't judge, like we listen and we don't judge, and recognizing that when someone shares something, it's not always for us to judge. It's not about us, like you were saying before, Kirsty.
Well, it's such a great game because when two people come into a relationship, they've often had very different backgrounds. And so like they haven't grown up the same way. They haven't had the same traumas. They haven't had the same incidents. There's so much that's different about them. And if you go into a conversation with both of you have the intention of we listen but we don't judge, you're setting the container then. And how cool is it? Like if people can take this on board, even if it's just in a fun way to start off with, we start to relate with each other more open-heartedly. And we start to break the shame and guilt cycle, which is so massive. And people don't speak to one another because they're afraid that they're going to get judged by the person who has like said that they loved them more than anyone else on the planet, for instance, in a relationship with someone. And like they won't let themselves speak because of this deep ingrained shame that's inside of them. But if we start a if we start a conversation from we listen but we don't judge, then we get to like give away a little bit more each time, and we let ourselves be seen. We prove to ourselves that, okay, I can trust that this person is not going to amplify my shame loop or my guilt loop, and I'm going to open my heart just a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more, because it is scary. Like it's scary to open our hearts straight up, big time. It just doesn't happen. And so if we can create circumstances that support one another to be able to open, 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 that's when we can learn more and more.
I feel like the lightness that you just spoke to is such a perfect example of why what that game does is when we make it playful, it instantly brings lightness to the shame. And when I said before that we were joking with this the other day, I had a dream and I was embarrassed to some degree about the dream. You know, there was a part of me that was like, oh, I really don't want to tell her that this was my dream, because it's like, what's going on in my psyche for that to have been my dream, you know? And so I was laughing about it because it was funny. And it was also this part of me that was like, I don't want to expose this, you know? And so I said to Nic, I had a really interesting dream last night. And she's like, oh, me too. And then I said, look, I'm going to tell you about it, but we listen and we don't judge. And she's laughing. And then I tell her the dream, and then, you know, we're just laughing because that was the container that was created as well. You know, the dream was also funny based on the context and based on the part of me that was like, oh, I'm, you know, like I prefer not to tell anybody this dream, you know? And so, yeah, I love that the lightness is actually what gives some access to, you know, the lightness is actually what breaks down shame.
And it also eliminates all the places where we actually judge. So it's like it sets the container. So we listen, but we don't judge. And then they say something and they're like, I'm actually judging this. But because the container sets it up, it illuminates it so that it doesn't become this thing that, you know, beyond that. Whereas if you were to just say to your partner, you know, sometimes I don't pick up the dog shit because I want you to pick it up and I don't want to have to pick it up. Without that container, their partner's going to be like, what the fuck? Like, why do you do that? It's not, why should it always be my responsibility? You know, and then it creates, whereas like if we set it up, we're like, we listen, but we don't judge, and that there's room for something else of like, oh yeah, I actually do that too. and so it's like, it eliminates the place in which we judge, but it also creates space for something else, you know, which I love. Yeah.
Because it all comes down to effective communicating, really, doesn't it? Effective relating equals effective communicating. For me, like on my own personal journey, particularly over the last 3 years, what I've discovered is the layers of judgment that I held around certain aspects of my reality, certain aspects of myself, when I see myself as the whole. And I understand, you know, everyone has different levels of understanding themselves as the whole. But for me, it's brought me this deep peace within myself of what is, you know, what is valuable to me, and the knowledge that I am who I am and I am so valuable, and therefore who I am in relationship is who I am, and I I deserve, without any sense of entitlement or control or anything like that, I deserve to have what I want, whilst knowing that what I want, it harms no one else. It is completely in alignment with the whole. And there's been so many judgments that I've unraveled in that, in the knowing of that, and continually returning to love within myself, and continually coming back to, okay, that question that you said at the start, what does this mean for me? What am I making this mean for me? And what do I actually want this to mean for me? And because every single time it's an invitation or an opportunity to get to know ourselves better, and to be able to relate more effectively, therefore, to another human.
Yeah.
And we all want to relate from lightness rather than like density, and we want to be happy, not miserable.
Yeah. The reason why I like the density and the like crunchiness is because I know what going there from a place of 100%, your 100% self-responsibility, knowing that the other person's taking 100% self-responsibility, where we can be in our own sovereign experience, and that can be truth as far as that goes, but it doesn't mean that it's the whole truth. And like allowing ourselves to go to the space of like, hey, when you do this, it reminds me of a situation with my mom and it triggers this. And so we become more relational with our experience, and then the experience that we're having with the other person, because generally that's what's being illuminated.
Yeah.
And then it's like through the crunchiness, through the stickiness, I know what is available on the other side of that, which is a deepening into intimacy with ourselves and with the other person. And so if I'm like, this is real fucking crunchy, I'm like, good. I'm glad it's crunchy, because I want to go beyond where I've been. I want to experience a relationship beyond what I've experienced up until now, because there's a part of me, my soul, whatever you want to describe it as, that knows the truth of what is available and is continually striving and yearning for that. And so I'm going to sit in the discomfort of this conversation right now, and we're going to go there. Because that's what it makes available, and because I hold that, I think that's what allows for that experience to be like pleasure in the unpleasurable, because I believe the place that I will go from that is expanding into more and more pleasure, and so I'm like, let's go there. No matter how hard it is, let's go. Carissa's like, oh God, do we have to?
Well, I mean, I obviously hold the same. It's just that like the willingness is there to do the hard thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it less hard for me. I'm willing to lean into the hardness, and I'm so available for what it makes available on the other side. And obviously, because that's why I am where I am in the way that I explore the world, is that my willingness to lean into the crunchy parts of my experience give me capacity and availability for something else. And in relationship, it's no different. And still feels crunchy.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we get to discover the depth of love that we have for ourselves. Because if I can hold myself in that place and I can come out the other side, like still in one piece, I get to go, wow, I just really gave myself a gift, and I get to expand the love for who I am and what I'm prepared to, like what I'm willing to encounter, where I'm willing to go in order to show myself the depth of love that I have for myself. And that's so powerful.
Totally. I feel like it's such a gift to ourselves for that side. And it's also, I was just thinking about how what you shared before, Nic, it's so easy to go into what am I making this mean about me? And I think that it is the greatest gift that we can give to our partners is to do our best to sit in a space of neutrality when somebody is sharing their experience with us. Because if we have the capacity, or we build the muscle to relate in a way that means that we can receive somebody and not make it mean something about us, then it offers more and more and more and more and more opportunity to have more moments like that. Because the more likely we are to take ourselves to this, making this mean something about me, or judging, like we shared before, then it kind of keeps closing doors rather than opening them. It just, and one thing that you always share, Nic, is always about, can I stay in the frequency of curiosity in this conversation rather than all the other frequencies? And again, when it comes to creating a container, whether it be we listen and we don't judge, or just knowing when we have space and time to have a conversation, like knowing that we're not rushing out the door, or that there's something else that's not like that's happening, that we can create space to have a conversation when it's necessary, means that we typically will have more capacity to have a conversation or to be in presence with another person rather than being distracted by something else that we need to do or somewhere else that we need to go, or, you know, any of those pieces. And it gives us a greater ability to sit in presence and sort of some form of neutrality. And I feel that's obviously a muscle that we have to build. Like, it's so easy and natural for relationships to provide us with opportunities to expand into relationship with ourselves. Yeah, and so I feel like it's a really beautiful practice to, I guess, be in neutrality with our self relationships as well. It kind of comes back to that circular thing that I was saying before about when the judgy one's judging the shameful one, and then there's another one that's judging all of that. And it's like, well, can I just be in neutrality of those two having that relationship, because it gives more space for some form of different relationship to be created.
Yeah. I also just, as you were sharing, babe, what I was remembering, and maybe this is a good place to start, Kirsty, is understanding the 4 agreements, because I feel like my deepening into understanding the 4 agreements has completely transformed how I show up relationally. Like, where am I making assumptions? Where am I taking it personally? Where am I not being impeccable with my word, right? And then even still, where am I being too hard on myself and not accepting that I'm actually doing my best? And sometimes my best isn't very good, but it's the best that I can do right now with the understanding that I have. And so acknowledging that, and then I guess that creates a container, the not taking things personally and not making assumptions, like asking questions, asking for clarity, like, you know, within the communication container, is it leaves, you know, it's completely transforms how you give and receive in relationship with your partner. And it's like that we listen and we don't judge. We're also not making assumptions. We're not making up stories. We're not making up, we're not personalizing it. We're not making them saying something mean something about us and vice versa. Yeah, I feel like that has like completely transformed. And also recognizing where I'm not impeccable with my word, because the effect of that is never usually pleasant. It's usually like, okay, I'm acknowledging where I could have been a bit more impeccable with my word, and and where I was taking your response personally, like, to understand like what's happening, like so much greater. I think, yeah, that helps create a container as well as those 4 agreements. So if you haven't checked out
Miguel
Ruiz, yeah, I would highly recommend checking that out as well, and putting that into practice when it comes to relating. Yeah.
Agreed. And there was one more thing, like, because I agree that they've been so transformational for me personally in my relationship with self, and therefore in my closest relationship as well. And the one thing that I wanted to add from what you said, Carissa, about creating the container and creating the opportunity to experience something new, I think for people that have been in relationship for a long time, often people fall into the trap of expecting the person to be the same as they've always been. And if you're in a long-term relationship and you're expecting the person to be the same as they've always been, that's going to get really stale after a period of time. And so opening to this potential that we can create something new every single day, and it can be more expanded than it has been before, is so opening, it's so freeing, and it's so enlightening for the relationship and for both people in it. And each person gets to express more of the wholeness of who they are when you're in that relationship, because you release all old ways of relating, all codependent ways, and you come into this place of like, I am sovereign. Come back to the sovereignty piece. I am sovereign, and the person opposite me is sovereign. And that's ultimately where we want to be. We want to be two sovereigns in a relationship, because that's the queen and the king, and they know who they are.
I don't own you, you don't own me. We are
Yes.
two sovereign beings who are learning how to love one another while simultaneously falling more and more in love with ourselves. Like, yeah, there's a book called Sovereign Love that I'm currently listening to at the moment, and it's a lot of what she speaks to. Danae Logan, I think her name is, and it's a lot to do with this, because you know, we have a lot of biases in relationship. We have a lot of things that we hold internally, constructs, and it's all about dismantling that paradigm of I own you, therefore you're in relationship with me, therefore it has to look this way, because in order for me to love you, then I need you to do X, Y, and Z, as opposed to, again, being in that curiosity of like, what is it that I need in relationship, what I value, and then what is this, can I hold this other person and what they value, and then can we be sovereign in love and choose love with one another, or not. And yeah, it speaks to all of that. And so I love that you brought in the sovereignty piece in love, because I feel like that's what creates a healthy, sustainable relationship for sure.
And I love that you brought in the part about the change that's available, because I just watched a Instagram reel yesterday that someone sent me. It was Bashar talking about how when we shift in consciousness, our reality shifts, and how we don't so we literally shift into a different version of Earth, where there's different versions of individuals that we're co-creating with. And because of the construct of a third dimensional consciousness and mind that we have spent, you know, so many years being a part of, we are limited, have been limited to our perception of versions of us that are constantly and shifting and changing. And when we go through a transformation of any description, even if that's a hard conversation where all of a sudden we've popped out to the other side, and like you said, Kirsty, we can just create something new from this now moment, and we can be in a different relationship to what we were in yesterday. We are literally not the person that we were the day before. And this is the case in every single waking moment of every single day. But we are, as a society, so resistant to change, and we want our people to remain the same to some degree. There's a conscious kind of bias towards that as a human being, because change can be more challenging. And obviously, the more we consciously explore change and expand our willingness for change, it becomes more natural and more easy and more fun. And at a like multi-dimensional level, we are constantly shifting in dimensions in who we're co-creating with at any given moment. And so, as in, one person can be multiple different versions of themselves in our relationship experience, and they can be multiple different expressions of themselves in other people, like with other relationships with other people. And every single time that we expand into a slightly higher level of consciousness, even just with micro little shifts, we are co-creating in a brand new relationship, even if we don't have that conversation. And so to add that conversation on top of it, it's like, okay, look, let's now have a conscious conversation about how we're going to co-create from these new versions of ourselves. It's like, wow, like what else is available? And I think as a society, we're so conditioned to, oh, this is no longer working for me, I'm out. Like it's like
Totally.
is at the second that something isn't in line with my values or isn't da 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 da, it's like, cool, like let's break apart, let's separate, because it's absolutely 99% of the time the easier way to go about it, you know, rather than expanding into something else together and exploring it more. And sometimes that's the path in which it comes to. There's like, okay, cool, there's no longer a continued path together. And it's, I guess, how much we've done to co-create to come to some form of resonance before we then, you know, as opposed to the second that something happens, we're out. And if we have been in love with this person, then I think there's always an opportunity to curiously explore the next version, to see if there's some resonance. And if there's not, that's okay too. It's not about ending that makes it bad. It's just like, how willing are we to explore the hard places and to mine and
listen and not judge.
exactly and navigate, you know, the pieces, because that is what gives us access to the next version, the next version, the next version, the next version. Because sometimes I think we bail before we get to meet that next version of the other person, because we're holding such a construct about who they are. And one of the things that I do my best to with all of my relationships is to hold that person beyond their stories and narratives of who they are, but also beyond my own, and do my best to unhook and unwrap my stories about who they are, because that limits and constricts them to be anything other than that in our relationship, whether it be my friends or my family or my, you know, intimate relationships. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And as you've just shared, again, it comes back to me being the best version of me, like doing my best. And when I'm doing my best, and when I know myself completely, and there's so many tools, there's so many ways that we get to know ourselves and that we get to deepen our relationship with self, we get to be able to see the other person and hold them in their highest, and like you said, unhook all aspects of self that that we can see is not helping them to be that highest version of self. And it all again just come back to love. Like there's so many tangents that we can take on this path of relating. It's no wonder that Nic like froths at it and gets so addicted to it. Because it's so incredibly powerful, and you could talk for days and days and days and days about it and still not have like a firm conclusion, apart from the fact that we come back to be impeccable with my word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and always do my best. And if each of us is doing that, my gosh, how would the world change?
100%. 100%. Yeah, it was interesting. Like as I was listening to you both speak, I was thinking about I was reminded of where we like to freeze, like as individuals, we like to freeze this idea or perception of another person, as opposed to owning that we are in co-creation of who we make someone be or mean or whatever it is. And again, that comes back to that, like, where are you willing to be 100% responsible? Because I know for a fact that sometimes I like to stay in that story of that person because I have a touch point, I have a wound, I have a Velcro that has me connected to them. And it's so much easier for me to stay in that frozen position of they are who I make them be, because I don't have to be responsible for creating something else beyond that, and I just get to be valid in my experience. I just get to be validated in my wounding. I get to be validated in my story around whatever I'm making this mean. And it's like, and it becomes like this holding bay. Like I often think like, wow, you know, I had a situation where I was like struggling when I was in my early 20s, and I tried to take my own life. And I think about the people who would have met me then. They would have created this image or this perception of who I was. And in their memory, that is the imprint of me, because that was their experience of me. But then who I am today is so far beyond that, but yet I'm frozen in time for them. And it always blows my mind of how we, you know, we may be continually expanding and evolving and shifting, but also there's periods of time, and we have experiences that as like individuals, we almost become frozen in our perception or our judgment of others, because of our experience with them. It's like, nah, that's exactly who they were. They showed up time and time again. That validates that that's who they were. Therefore, I'm going to keep them over there. I'm going to keep them in this little holding bay. And like, as I've learned more and more, as I've grown and understood like more and more about relationships, this is something really beautiful that I feel I notice and that happens in my body, in my field, is it starts to, this frozen in time perception starts to unravel. And I start to accept it because I have a greater understanding of what was actually happening and the truth beyond the experience or the person that I froze in time, and my relationship with them and why it played out the way that it played out, that sort of has that like unravel in my field and my body. And it's such a, like, the more that I learn, the more that experience happens. And it goes to show that, you know, when we choose to show up in a particular way and we choose to learn, that you know, we accept it. We accept that we are probably going to be that person for someone else, and we're going to be fixed in time for them, you know, but we get to see it in a different light, and we get to experience it in a different way, and we get to heal through that and not necessarily judge the other in the same way that we have, because we understand and appreciate in a much greater scale than we did before, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to add that little bit.
Yeah. I feel like it's a really beautiful perspective to recognize part of not taking it personally too, because somebody else's experience of us and their perception of that moment is literally not personal. And their stories and their constructs about us are completely constructed from their life experiences, and their relationship with the part of us that they're creating through their experience, or naming or judging through their experience, is a complete reflection of like their internal relationship and experience. And it's so interesting because it's so easy to and I think we kind of mentioned this on our, I don't know if we spoke about this on our, I don't think we did talk about it on the podcast, Kirsty. We had a conversation about this just recently, about how we can ultimately have a group of people or just two people who have the same perception of another person. And this is called, like, ultimately we can validate each other's experience of this other person through colluding with one another. And I was saying to Kirsty the other day that, you know, I know who to call if I want to collude. You know, I know who to call if I want someone to hold the person that I'm having a conversation about in a place that is beyond what I can hold them in that moment. And I will only have those kinds of conversations with particular people who have that ability, because when we can perceive, when we can recognize that somebody's experience of somebody is just their experience, doesn't actually mean anything about the other person, we can start to have that experience for ourselves too, is to recognize that just because this other person has this perception of us, it's actually, and even if they're colluding with 5 other people that all have the same perception, it's their own reflection of their own internal reality. And it's just where those 5 people match in their perceptions, because there could be a whole nother 20 people over here that have a totally different experience of me and that have a totally different perception of me. And so it gives I think it just gives another little nugget of like, this is why we don't have to take things personally. And it gives us a little bit more capacity to also not take it personally, but also not make it personal about somebody else when we have a judgment or a perception of them.
I love that word colluding. It sounds so sinister, doesn't it?
Totally. Yeah. It's just where we validate each other's stories, you know, and it's such a society. It's absolutely one of the most natural things that we can do is it's where we create resonance with each other. It's where we have the same, it's sameness, you know, and sameness brings us so often into closeness. And so it's so easy to fall into colluding. And it's such a funny word.
Totally.
Yeah. Beautiful. What an epic combo.
Yeah. It's almost like don't want it to end.
I know there's so many ways you can go. That's why I love relationships so much, because there's not just like a one size fits all and like one way in which you can go. It's like it could go, you know, there's so many layers, so many things that you could speak to. You know, I feel like it's like the reason why I love it so much is because it's been part of what I've needed to be relational. You know, I've needed to understand it on a much greater scale, so that I can actually get closer and closer to the truth of who I am beyond the, you know, the pieces that I received growing up, or, you know, the templates that society have, and just come deeper and deeper and deeper into truth and love, and also share that with the world, so that, you know, we're not continually playing out these old patterns and getting caught up in our stories and our wounding. So yeah.
Totally. Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thanks, Nic.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Really beautiful.
It's a blessing to be in relationship with both of you.
It is a blessing indeed.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so we will share in the show notes of where you can find Nic and what her social media and stuff like that. And we might even make a reference of the Four Agreements book. And also we made a mention of the attachment styles. And if somebody is listening to this and doesn't know what their attachment style is, or has never heard of attachment styles, there is a epic, really straightforward, very like easy to read book called Attached. That's where I started my attachment journey many years ago. And there's also a test that you can do online to just get an idea of in what kind of area you sit naturally. And I think there was one other thing that you spoke to
Sovereign Love.
Sovereign Love,
the book. Yeah. And so maybe we can make a little link to each of those things. And so, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. And if you have any notes or like anything you want to share in relationship to this, what you've received from it, we would love to hear about it. We love hearing from people that are listening. It's really beautiful. And so, yeah, thank you for listening. Thanks for being here for part of this conversation. And we look forward to the excitement of expanding into greater love for all of us.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.